Most of us know the dangers of being exposed to high levels of radium in the 21st century. The same could not be said about those living in the early 20th century. They had to find out the hard way, some suffering through osteonecrosis, aplastic anemia, and multiple forms of cancer, usually unknown at that time. Radium was first discovered in 1898 by Marie and Pierre Curie. In the years that followed, corporations capitalized on the new glow-in-the-dark element that the public was so awed by. The United States Radium Corporation was one of them, and they invented radioluminescent paint that was applied to watch dials. These watches were popular among soldiers fighting in trenches during World War I because they allowed them to see the time on their watches in the dark. The USRC opened 3 New Jersey factories and primarily employed young, white, unmarried, and middle-class women. These women, like most of the public during this time, were unaware of the dangers of exposure to radium without proper safety precautions. They were advised to lick the ends of their radium-coated paintbrushes to create a fine point to make the painting process faster and more efficient. As a result, some of these women began experiencing major health issues, which we now know to be symptoms of radiation poisoning. The women and their physicians were originally unsure of the causes of these symptoms, but then they realized that all of the women had one thing in common. They all worked for the USRC as dial painters. What ensued was a harsh legal battle between the formerly employed dial painters and the USRC. The women wanted accountability and compensation from the USRC for their medical issues. The USRC fought and failed to cover up the results of recent medical studies that found radium to be the cause of the women's health issues. In the end, the USRC agreed to a settlement where they would be ordered to pay for all of the former employees' medical bills unless new evidence arose that proved radium was not responsible for their illnesses. Most historians conclude the research at this point, where the former employees received their due justice from the USRC. I want to shed light on how their fight for industrial and health reform has impacted us almost an exact century later. Understanding the events that led to the legal battle between Grace Fryer and the USRC is crucial before analyzing the 1927 lawsuit and the following 1928 settlement. In 1927, Grace Fryer filed a lawsuit with the New Jersey Supreme Court against the USRC. The USRC formerly employed Fryer as a dial painter from April 1917 to January 1921. In her statement filed alongside her lawsuit, Fryer claimed she began feeling pains in her back and feet in June 1922, and that this was the first time in her life that she had any chronic health issues. Fryer thought it was a common bout of rheumatism and did not think anything of it until she began experiencing dental issues a year later. After visiting her dentist, she was informed that she was suffering from osteonecrosis of the jaw. Fryer and her physicians debated the cause of her condition, and they concluded it was most likely due to her regularly ingesting radium over the course of 3 years while employed as a dial painter. Fryer noted that multiple other women she worked with also felt ill around the same time as her. The USRC never informed any of their employees about the risks of ingesting radium and refused to admit radium was the cause of her illness. In 1927, after years of silence from the USRC, Fryer filed a lawsuit with witness statements from her fellow former dial painters such as Catherine Wiley, Catherine Schwab, and Edna Husman. Fryer demanded accountability from the USRC and a payment of $125,000, which is the equivalent of $2.3 million in 2025, because of the devastating impact her illnesses had on her quality of life. The USRC knew if they fought against Fryer's accusations, it would be highly publicized in the newspapers, even more than it already had, and that it would have a devastating effect on the radium industry's value. In 1928, the USRC decided to settle with Fryer. The New Jersey Supreme Court ordered the USRC to pay Fryer $600 per year, which is around $11,000 per year in 2025, until the rest of her life, or until there was concrete evidence that proved radium was not the sole cause of her illnesses, and to pay for all of her medical bills. In 1933, less than 5 years after the settlement, Fryer died from a sarcoma in the shoulder caused by radiation poisoning at the age of 34. Fryer's decision to take legal action against the USRC inspired multiple other dial painters to seek compensation for their radium-caused illnesses, ushering in the creation of occupational safety gear and labor health legislation. In the immediate aftermath of the settlement, the U.S. radium industry enforced regulations to ensure employees receive personal protective equipment and regular medical examinations. The USRC continued to manufacture products containing radium up until 1968 because of the passing of the Radiation Control for Health and Safety Act, which banned the use of radium in consumer products. Until then, the USRC was pressured by the New Jersey Health and Labor Department to ensure its employees were properly protected from radium exposure. Lip painting and other forms of applying radium on the skin were immediately banned in all of the factories. The USRC gave the dial painters protective clothing to wear in the factories and to reduce the amount of trace radiation on their clothing. This would have lowered the chances of radium ending up in the dial painters' homes. The dial painters' radiation levels were routinely tested using breath samples. The dial painters were instructed to exhale into a machine that would record the radon content of the exhaled air. If the dial painters' radon levels were deemed too high, they were removed from the workplace until their radon levels were back to lower levels. The factories themselves were renovated with new ventilation systems to prevent the spread of airborne radium particles in the air. These regulations had a positive impact on the dial painters' health. While they were still exposed to gamma rays emitted from the radium in moderate doses, this had less lethal consequences when compared to the practice of ingesting the radium. The settlement reached between the USRC and its former employees helped normalize compensation to those affected by occupational hazards. Instead of fighting in court, the USRC settled with the dial painters. This allowed them to avoid long, publicized legal battles without actually admitting guilt on paper. Although the settlement did not establish that the USRC was liable in court, it proved that corporations were being held to a higher standard and could no longer ignore the health and safety of their workers without the consequences. The case was one of the first in the fight for workers' compensation, highlighting the need for laws that would protect the health of employees in the industrial age. The hardships that the radium dial painters endured helped inspire the creation of federal and local labor laws in the United States, including the creation of the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, also known as OSHA, in 1970. Their prolonged exposure to toxic materials in the workplace, with the addition of a lack of protective measures and transparency from the USRC, highlighted the dangers many workers face without regulations put in place. The public support of the dial painters and the legal battles that followed inspired labor reform. Lawmakers and advocates, such as the National Consumers League, used these cases as evidence of the need for more comprehensive worker protections. In 1970, President Richard Nixon signed the Occupational Safety and Health Act into law, establishing OSHA. The legal battles and advocacy efforts led by the dial painters extended far beyond the courtroom. Their persistence in the face of corporate denial and medical misinformation played a big role in shaping future labor laws in the United States. Although many of the women died before seeing the long-term impact of their fight, their efforts brought national attention to the devastating consequences of unchecked industrial practices. Their story not only inspired public sympathy, but also set a precedent for how workers could organize, seek justice, and demand accountability from powerful corporations. Ultimately, the dial painters' legacy lives on through the labor laws and safety standards we benefit from today. Their experiences helped start a nationwide movement towards workplace reform, culminating in the passing of the Occupational Safety and Health Act of 1970. Their story serves as a reminder for the systematic change that begins with the courage of a few individuals who are willing to speak out, no matter the cost. Through this research, their historical significance as catalysts for industrial health reform is not only remembered but firmly established.